million a year. I remember being on the ship and having to sell parts of the old fishing gear to a scrap metal dealer so we can buy groceries to eat food. You know, we struggled, but what we did have was our commitment and our knowledge of knowing that what we fought for was just and right. No law said that. We just knew it. We knew that the 10 species of great whales that had been previously hunted by commercial whaling had decimated them to the brink of extinction, and that the continued hunting of them would lead to their extinction. And eventually, even the International Whaling Commission enacted a ban on commercial whaling in 1986. Iceland was the first nation to violate that ban, and unfortunately, the story has changed, but at the time, it was decided that we would take action against them, myself and one other individual, David Howitt, a 23-year-old Cornishman from Western England at the time. We went to Iceland, and we, under the guise of being just European travelers and casual workers, got jobs in recon the whaling industry, and in 1986 took action against the 4 whaling ships in the whaling station operated by Iceland. We successfully sunk 2 of the whaling ships and totally destroyed the whaling station in a matter of 6 to 8 hours of just sabotage tactics, and escaped the country. And when we arrived in Britain and in New York, as we both went back to our home countries, we accepted responsibility for our actions. We stood up to the Icelandic government who were calling us terrorists, and we said, no, you're the terrorist. You are the one with blood on your hands. You are the one who are violating international law, international agreements that say that there is a moratorium on commercial whaling. And as a result of that, we said, we welcome criminal charges against us, because it'll give us a further platform to denounce their pirate whaling activities. To this day, they've never pressed criminal charges against us. But I wish that was the end of the story, but it isn't. And this past summer, Iceland started whaling again, and this summer, the Sea Shepherd will be confronting them. And I encourage all of you who are able to apply for a position on the crew of the Sea Shepherd. If you can't make it in the summertime, try the spring. They're going to be going to the Canadian harp seal hunt. To this day, the world's largest slaughter of wildlife. I first became aware of animal rights through the Canadian harp seal hunt. And it troubles me deeply to see 35 years later that that hunt still continues. It's actually expanded. In the absence of direct action, which has been the only thing successfully in those 30 years to stop the seal hunt, it has come back. We can't rest. We can never rest. We can never achieve a monumentous victory that we can then rest back on. That's not going to happen in our time. I wish I could believe that we could even see the end of vivisection or the fur trade. But I don't operate on that frame of reference. I operate on the sense of knowing that we have to stand up for what we believe for every single day. For the sake of a short-term victory, we cannot compromise those principles that we hold dearest, because of the people in this country, those of you who represent your respective groups and regions and friends, we are the people that represent the animal world, as only as the animals would represent themselves. You know, we can't leave it to the PETAs and the humane societies and the Fun for Animals and the Greenpeace groups. You know, it's not as simple as writing a check for $50 every year and being absolved of any guilt for what our society is doing. And likewise, it's not as easy as just choosing to live a vegan lifestyle. It is definitely a step in the right direction, but it is far short from the commitment that we should make. If we truly represent the animals as we say we do, then we need to not only eat them, we need to fight for them. And we need to represent them as we would our own families, our own brothers and sisters, because they are our brothers and sisters, and we are the only family they have left. Look what the federal government has done to the American Indian movement. I was in Chinle last week in the Navajo Nation. You don't have to go to Iraq to see third world conditions. You just have to drive a few hours north of Phoenix. You know, you want to see the prosperity that George Bush talks about? Go tell it to a Dene person in Chinle. Go tell it to one of the alcoholics begging for money in front of the Bosch's, or to the many stray dogs that are laying dead on the side of the roads. You know, those people were some of the longest held prisoners of war in this country. That record will probably be broken by those in Guantanamo Bay. But at the time, They were the longest held prisoners. They were forcibly marched from their homeland to New Mexico. Many of them died along the way. Those who survived made their way back. And they're there today, and they're living their traditions. And one of the proudest things that I see when I'm up there in the Navajo Nation is a society that still exists with a worldview that you and I believe, adhere to. You know, the Dene people, there's places where you can go on Big Mountain where people don't speak English. They just speak Dene. They've never learned how to speak English. They don't interact with American society. They still retain their tradition, their culture. I wish all of us could say the same thing. But we've all, at one time or another in our family's history, been the target of genocide, been the target of repression. And it has been for the intent of erasing that knowledge of our relationship to the natural world that people like George Bush force their policies upon us today. I believe that as long as the memory of such a world exists, such a world that is inclusive of all life exists, that there will be war against us. There has been up to this day. I don't see anything to indicate why that would change. So to meet that challenge, we have to be ready to go to prison. We can't just be concerned about whether we're going to get vegan food in prison. Don't worry about that. It'll work itself out. You know, we have to be survivors, like Coyote and the other animals that still exist in this world. You know, going to prison, I spent 4 years in prison. That's nothing. It's like going to the DMV. You know, you got to do it, register your car, whatever, you got to wait in the lines, you just got to do it, you just do it. You know, that's what those 4 years were like. I knew I had to be there, just have to make the most of it. And most of all, our struggle does not end when we go to prison. As Jeffrey demonstrates, this young man is locked up for 23 years. What hope does he have for freedom? Has he shown a broken spirit? Has he lost sight of his vision? Has he given up hope? No. I see him becoming more powerful, more centered. And he is one of our leaders because he is demonstrating to us that what doesn't destroy us makes us stronger. And that has to become our mantra, because there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be causing pain in our lives when we continue believing in the things we believe in. What led me to prison was this, when I left Sea Shepherd, I started up an independent investigation agency called Global Investigations to document environmental and animal abuse, believing that if we did so, we could expose that evidence to the public and they would be outraged and there would be change as a result. Well, that didn't work. It still doesn't work. I mean, we've well documented the wrongs of our society. We know what's going on in the vivisection laboratories. You know, how many tortured beagles do we have to see before we know that it's evil? How many people do we have to see maimed by US troops in Iraq before we realize that the real terrorists wear US Army uniforms? How many babies do we have to see being murdered before we realize that we have a responsibility to stop those troops and target them, not just in Iraq, but here, because they are our people, our country. A Dene person told me, we are five-fingered people. We are responsible for the actions of our own. It is up to nobody else but ourselves to stop what others of our own kind do. And so, I guess I should have drank that pause a bit, but so I did this investigation. We got our documentation. It focused on fur farms in America. We were hired by Friends of Animals to document the conditions on fur farms because most of the anti-fur movement's ammunition has been against the steel jaw leg-hold trap. And as a result of the depletion of wild fur-bearing animals, the fur industry shifted towards intensive confinement rearing of foxes and mink primarily to serve the demand. And not much evidence existed in this country of the conditions on fur farms. We had lots of stuff of farms in South Korea and in Europe, but not that much in America. So we traveled around to probably 24 different fur farms in Idaho, Montana, Oregon, California, Utah, and surreptitiously and covertly and overtly went onto these farms in the day